Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of our days dedicated to talks at IndieX 2021. We are celebrating the indie games industry, and for me, it's an honor to have one of its main protagonists for the last couple of decades. I think I'm allowed to say this. And with me, it's Mr. Agostino Simonetta, who is now the CSO of the Thunderful Group. Ago, how are you? Thanks a lot for being with us at IndieX.
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Thanks so much, Ricardo, for having me here today. And I think you're being a bit too kind and a bit too generous, but I'm gonna take that.
Well, some people that follows the indie games industry recognize you already for your previous work. You worked for a few years at ID at Xbox, if I'm correct.
Yeah, you're correct. I joined Thunderful on the 1st of July this year, and I was at Xbox for nearly 7 years. When I left, I was the director of the global partnership team for the Idea Xbox program, working with developers all over the world, coming to the platforms.
So, and you've been around. You've and are an experienced person in the games industry in general. And when we talk about indie games, we can notice that there are lots of things that changed in the last few decades, and the actual video games market changed a lot. If you take, for example, in consideration the actual current concept of the term indie, and you think about, for example, in the 80s when we had those Amiga and Spectrum developers, do you think they would be called nowadays?
That's a great question. Over the years, when it was at Xbox or PlayStation, people kept asking me. Uh, my general answer is that I like to talk about independent developers or digital publishers, if developers are self-publishing, rather than using the term indie. The term indie in our industry and in other industries as well has become a very loaded term.
Yeah.
Is a term that means a lot of different things for different people. How to define indie? It's a question that explodes on Twitter every now and then, and people give their own opinions. And how do you define indie? I think independent developer probably better depict the status of the industry today. Studios of one person or 50, whatever the size it might be, from an office, from a living room, from a basement. There are developers creating content, and they are independent because they are not owned by a major player in the market. So I think that better defines it. And companies, they are not just developing their own games, but actually publishing their own games. I like to call them digital publishers.
Yeah.
In a way, better describe the task in hand. Um, you know, Developing a game has always been hard, and it's not any easier today. Creating compelling stories, exciting gameplay, delivering a high polished product is never easy. So development is not necessarily easier today than it was before. But when a company, self-publishing developer, thinks about themselves as a digital publisher, suddenly you need to start thinking, what does it mean? What are the tasks I need to do? And kind of gets you in the right mindset for the task. I think at Xbox, I was asked this question plenty of time, but once I dared say that if you're a self-publishing developer, creating the game is 35% of the job. I don't know. There is a way to quantify the percentage, but the message I was trying to convey is that the big challenge today is actually the publishing bit.
Yeah.
Creating a game is hard, but actually publishing is becoming harder and harder. So that's why I like to frame it that way. And, I was not part of the generation of the 80s. I mean, I've been in the industry for over 20 years. I've been working with independent developers for the last 16 years, around that, 16, 17 years. I used to be an independent developer myself when I started in an Italian villa, small team, working on a game that turned out not to be a great game. The usual story. Um, I mean, those days and today, I think the things that connect the two eras, that people can do it in their own living room. It's a viable model for developers to do a one person in a living room creating something that is amazing. There was a period in between the 80s and the 2020s where that was no longer really a viable business model because of the commercials of creating game in that period in between. And then the distribution, right? In the early days, I have friends that, slightly older than me, or, that were better in their early teenage years to create those experiences. They were selling directly to consumer via mail, like shipping
Yeah.
the tapes or whatever by mails. And that's another things we have in common today. Thank God today we don't need to ship tapes or floppy disks. We can actually distribute digitally content to millions and millions of consumers that click of the button can download. So I think those two things are in common for sure. So I think there is a common DNA or common traits to the two periods in time. But yeah, I like to move away from the term indie, even though it has a place. But in general conversation, I prefer to talk about independent developers.
And that's something interesting about the actual term, because if you look at the last 15 years, for example, I think there was a small window of time where something happened similar to the music industry, for example, where indie is actually a genre. And I feel that I think when we from the first decade to the 2010, I think there was some people trying to coin the term indie in video games as a genre, which for me is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I think there was probably you're right, a point in time when digital distribution, especially, was starting to be a thing. And actually, people often think about the launch of the iPhone as a milestone, or the launch of Xbox Live, and then in the arcade, or PlayStation enabled instant publishing. There are people that, depending on their age, their experience, their point of view, they try to pinpoint at different times. Shareware on the web has been going on a while, right? But I think for me, one period of time where there was a lot of activities going on that maybe was under the radar, but then I found this fruition later on. It's actually the Java Flash days,
Yeah, yeah,
right? When small developers were creating Flash game for the various portals, Castle Crash and things like
yeah.
that, or when small independent developers were working on mobile Series 30 Nokia devices, creating those mobile games. At the time, the industry was looking down on. I worked at THQ Wireless, and then when I went to Sega, we were working on mobile games on Series 40 devices, Series 30 devices. A lot of developers that back then, they were like indies, two, three people, they were creating those experiences for us. Then over the years, they moved on across other platforms, and suddenly some of those guys are now super big
Yeah.
celebrities or work on massive games, right? So in reality, when you write the history of the indie movement, it goes all the way to the 80s, and I think there are multiple different phases. My journey as more on the business side, not as a developer, really started on mobile phones. And some of the people I used to work back then in 2005, I'd say, on those small mobile experiences. Now they are big successes. I mean, one company I can mention, maybe it's slightly later than that, Mediatonic.
Yeah, yeah.
I was at Sega, and we had a great partnership with Paul and the team at Mediatonic when they were doing Flash games, right? For Play Sega, our portal for Flash games, and those people you project down the years, from 2007, probably 2008, you go to 2020. Look what happened to that company, right? So I think it's always a fun exercise to do, to go down the memory lane and think about where the companies today, where the title, where the business model, where the mindsets are coming, but looking 15 years behind us.
Uh, there's usually an anecdotal situation I usually say when I do some talks, which is a few years ago I had a dinner with Colin Johansson, which is the director of NC Soft, and it
Yeah.
was around the release of Guild Wars 2, and we were speaking specifically of budget and how the public are receiving content. And he was saying on E3 that he was showcasing and releasing Guild Wars 2. In that year, Guild Wars 2 was nominated as one of the best games of the year, side by side with Faster Than Light FTL, which is a great game. And he told me like the guys that created FTL reached him and called him. So, do you want to try our game? And he went there. They had this small table with a laptop, and he tried the game. And it was like, this. We are so fortunate that we live in a time where a game with a budget like Guild Wars 2 that has hundreds of people working for years can have this same kind of recognition, both critical and in terms of consumer base, of course, with a different scale, than a game literally done by two people in a garage. So I think these are fortunate times in that way, you know.
It's an incredible time. And I mean, I always feel lucky, coincidentally, where I ended up in my career to be part of that journey with a lot of those developers. The beauty of seeing something that is so small suddenly becoming absolutely a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
When you think about, I mean, for anybody that's working ID at Xbox at that point in time, Cuphead will always be a pivotal moment. When you show a product like Cuphead that the team liked and, done by the two brothers and, you put in a montage at E3, I think it was like 5, 6 seconds of the montage. And suddenly it turned from, that's a cool looking indie game, call it indie. And suddenly like it becomes the most anticipated title that you have and you're showing at that point in time as an idea at Xbox program, right? And then suddenly it becomes a huge commercial success
Yeah.
across multiple platforms. It becomes like merchandise and TV content. It's just insane that that's even possible, right? The dream that two people had of creating something special suddenly turns in is something that's a cultural phenomenon now, and it comes from anywhere. I mean, a few years ago, I went to Lisbon. I came to Lisbon,
Yeah.
and my colleague at the time, my colleague Miguel from
Miguel. Yeah.
from the Microsoft team invites me. It was my early days at Idea Xbox. So look, we're doing this developer event in Lisbon. You really need to come. So, and I was like, yeah, fantastic. Never been to Lisbon. Great reason to go. Also, I heard there is a great community there, so let's go. And then again, Miguel introduced me to this guy I didn't know that was working on a game, and Miguel, look, you need to look at this game. You need to look at this game. My friend is super talented, and then suddenly I find myself playing 12 minutes from Luis Antonio,
Yeah.
right? This random trip. Up until the last minute, I wasn't sure I could make it, and then I get the most random encounter, right? I could have been anywhere else at that point. Uh, and I start playing the game, and it's kind of a realization that this amazing creator is building something transformational, again, out of nowhere. And that's one of the beauty of the industry today, that any one time you can have one single person working in a coffee place or in their house, creating something that will transform or will have a large impact on the industry in 3 years' time.
And you were talking about the difference that happened. Like there was a specific time where you couldn't have, it wasn't feasible to have a business built on yourself or just a small group. But if we now notice that this democratization of the development of the development engines, for example, and the knowledge around the actual development of a game is completely changed from 20 years ago. Do you think that aside from the semi-saturation or actual saturation of the release market, there is other downside for this democratic access to development tools?
Cultural phenomenon as a whole. Let's ignore for a moment, is this good for Thunderful as a business? Is it good
Yeah.
for the developers? Let's ignore that. But a cultural phenomenon, the democratization of game creation, distribution, it's the best thing that's ever happened. I talked a lot. I've talked a lot about this over the years when I was doing my interviews, and like there's been this combination of the digital distribution really becoming a reality by Java phones or by the Steam and then all mobile and iPhone and Android and PlayStation. Like effectively because of technological breakthrough of the internet, suddenly at a click of a button, hundreds of millions of people can download a piece of content from anywhere they are, right? So um, the technical transformation, really the infrastructure transformation, then suddenly has enabled platforms to open the doors to a business model that is enabling developers of every size to be able to launch a small games with 50,000, but maybe these days 50,000 more rare than it was when I a few years ago, but very little investment to launch on their platform. It's not that the platform holders were evil in the past, simply that the nature of physical distribution
Yeah.
meant that the cost of goods, transportation, the trucks, the warehouse, the financial didn't stack up for smaller games. It was very, very hard.
There was, in a way,
So
some gatekeeping too, with all the business model that existed.
every time there is a new business model, people are successful in the existing ecosystem.
Yeah.
They can be protective of that. The business is working very, very well for everyone here. This is a new, and this could be digital distribution, free to play, whatever it is, right? There's always, and this is not just in gaming, right? Every economical ecosystem tries to resist change, disruptive change. Ultimately, disruptive change tends to win if it's positive for the consumers, for the ecosystem. But yeah, the platform opened up, right? Some of the platform opened up and you're really keen to open up. Some platforms had to open up just to respond to the market. And then suddenly you have distribution, digital distribution, you have the platform opening up, and then you have the tools, the middlewares, the technology providers that respond to this evolution of the market and say, look, there are so many developers. Not all of them can actually pay a huge amount of money upfront to buy our technology. Let's evolve our business models. And I think those three elements started influencing each other. And this was really like, we were living through this time when I was at PlayStation, we were launching PSP minis and we were PlayStation, we were talking about everybody self-publishing. We were seeing this happening, and it was happening on 360 with Live Arcade. Actually, Xbox did a great job at that point in time. Um, and those three changes influenced each other in a positive way to the point that, as a whole, we are creative animals. We always wanted to write books and music and then create video content. Suddenly, more and more people are able to create interactive experiences. And I think we are in the best time ever in video games. Now, doesn't mean that it's the easiest, and doesn't mean that it's good for every individual player in the ecosystem. I mean, there are no ecosystem where everybody wins.
Yeah.
But as a whole, there's never been a better time.
You just spoke about all the other content. In this moment, we, not as people involved in the industry, but as humans, as consumers, we have access to video games, music, TV series, films. We have access to everything in the click of a button or a touch of a screen. And do you feel that in this moment, what everyone is actually doing, it's not competing inside their own industries, but actually competing for something far more important, which is our individual time and free time to actually consume all this content?
100%. I mean, the number one resource that's very, very scarce is not necessarily just money, which
Yeah.
is, it's a scarce resource, but it's actually time. And suddenly, the evolution, the digital transformation happened for games, but also happened for video content and or music and books, and the subscription, making content available at relatively cheap cost when you divided your monthly subscription by the amount of hours you spend on Netflix or Amazon or Game Pass or whatever you want to talk about. And suddenly you're competing for people's time. And yeah, and suddenly you're starting to see different part of the entertainment ecosystem, or just all the different activities that where people spend time competing with each other. Today, if you're a gaming company or you're a major platform, you're no longer competing just with other gaming platform. If you're a video content platform, you're not just competing with the video content platform.
Yeah.
You are competing with all the others to get people's time. And more over the last few years, there's been this shift in the mindset in terms of the way companies look at what's number one priority for them to achieve. And the number one priority, obviously, all the companies want to make money. Being an indie or being a big, like most
Yeah.
people need to make money, but I think it's actually engagement.
Yeah.
People really want to create experiences that create engagement, and that sometimes sounds like a mercenary way of expressing it. They just want people to love what they create. And if people love an experience and they engage with the experience, it means they love it. And then effectively becomes a positive cycle for the companies offering services or games or videos and TV series or whatever you like.
Because you cannot, for my example, thinking about what is the economic reality of Southern Europe, for my case Portugal.
Yeah.
Imagining 25 years ago, 30 years ago, the money was actually the great barrier to get content. So in my example, I had like 2-3 games each year because that's all I could save to buy, because the the minimum wage was too low to actually buy games. But now, take example Xbox Game Pass. You have huge content weekly being um, uh, presented, and the reality, like you said, the most important currency is time. I don't have time to consume everything I really wanted to experience.
That's a super valid point. And when we talk about digital distribution, one of the things we are also talking, or it's implied in it, generally it's a global thing, right? Digital
Yeah.
distribution goes beyond barriers and distances, and so we need to start. Businesses need to think about what it means to go global. You talk about Southern Europe. I mean, I've been in the UK now for 20 years. I come from Italy. The economics in Italy 20 years ago when I left are different from today, different from what I found in the UK when I moved here, different from America. But then we're looking at the global audience, right? Let's never forget that in Western Europe, no matter which country we're in, we tend to be in a privileged situation.
Yeah.
But when you look at where the market has gone today with the business model, games have never been as accessible as today across the globe. Now, is it a perfect situation? Yeah, no, but I think it's way better today. I think the cost gatekeeping is again digital distribution has allowed the new business model to evolve to make it possible for more people at different level of the disposable income spectrum to actually access content. Right? Free to play has been a great transformation for our industry. Right?
Yeah.
Coming from I guess fair to say, coming from the East first. Korea was at the forefront, in China, and then coming over to the West. I think really that's really transformed. And mobile devices are really transforming access to content. When you think about some of the countries where economies are evolving, most of the time people are accessing internet and content for the first time, not through consoles, not through PCs, but by mobile devices.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and businesses need to think about that because there are billions of people that will never buy a console. Billion of people that might not really have access to a PC as easily as they have access to a phone. And then you start seeing phenomena like streaming that is becoming important, for Nvidia or for Xbox, for PlayStation. The ability to stream console next gen quality titles on mobile devices that really don't have a very powerful CPU.
Yeah, talking about the business side and picking up what you were saying, when we imagine like in 10, 12 years ago, a good indie game with little to known marketing could still get media and the consumer's attention. But nowadays, it's far easier to actually slip through the cracks. Do you believe in this current market situation? Is there anything that can be done to revert this?
You can't revert evolution.
Yeah.
You know, um, at the time when Xbox 360 had title Limbo launching, those days, right? Braid and Limbo. I was at Sony when we launched Joe Danger from Hello Games. It was a very different market, and I'm talking about console now. The same applies on PC. Obviously, at the time you had Steam, right? There was a large audience of people that bought those devices, gaming PCs or consoles. So there was the install base was big, but the indie offering was extremely limited. So, I mean, those titles were breakthrough successes because they were great games. And at the time, getting those games on the platform wasn't easy. But then the competition wasn't there. So without diminishing the value, the creative value of those products, they are still today incredible experiences. The competition wasn't there. When you launch one independent games a week, and you have an install base of tens of millions, and out of those tens of millions, even if you have 1 million people interested in independent games, it's very easy to see how you have a return on day one and week one. Today, it's the democratization of development and publishing and the changing business models, just that's gone. The time is gone. The time of I launch something that's good. It's very hard work to launch it. The platform are not ready for me. The processes are clunky. There is gatekeeping. So, there's only a handful of games. Those days are gone. So it's great to reminiscing about these games.
Yeah.
I think we need to move as an industry and look at those out. That was a point in time in our history that will never come back.
And you had another aspect, which was the financial side, because you didn't have as much competition for indie games. But when a consumer looked at a digital storefront, the difference between the actual price of a AAA game or an indie game, so-called indie game, and there were so few of them that maybe it was easier for you to invest 9.99, 14.99, and buy the game.
You had a massively engaged audience being on Steam, being on the consoles. You have a lot of core gamers, and there is this new product that you were probably, if you were in the UK, you were probably reading Edge magazine, and you go and buy it. It's 14.99. Why would you not buy it if you're a core gamer? You understand that space, right? And so yeah, and there was nothing else that week launching, right? Maybe there was one or two titles. So it was easier than it is now when every day or every week or every month there are so many games, there are so many different business models from which you can get the games. Um, it's just uncomparable. But then at the time, it was very hard to get investment for indie games, right?
Yeah.
There were not many banks, so many investors that were going investing in independent games. A lot of those people that found a captive audience, they were really bold. They were going somewhere where nobody had been before. So that's something that we shouldn't, when we talk about how easy it was to actually have a return, but actually it was incredibly hard to achieve that ability to launch on a platform. So again, um, different time, different problems. Um, it was incredibly hard to get to the console.
You just told us that you joined Thunderful Group in July. You have two decades of experience in the industry, and you worked with lots of indie developers through the years. Do you think that the growth that happened with the Imogen Form and Zoink and the creation of a group like Thunderful is achievable for indie companies, or this is some kind of a one of a kind situation, like an alignment of the stars to something like this to be able to pull through?
I think in general, there, today is, and Thunderful took a very precise path. We have our own road we charted, right? And there are other companies that, like us, they have taken different roads. When you think about Tiny Build, when
Yeah.
you think about Devolve, Raw Fury, when you look at these independent focused publishers slash developers, all of us have come to a similar kind of evolution from very, very different paths and point of origin. But when you think the opportunity is there today, when I was an indie developer, it was seven of us working on this terrible football management game. There was not even the dream of suddenly becoming the next big thing and to self-publish the product. Like
Your
now
dream was
it
to
is possible.
publish. Your dream was to publish at the time.
No, well, at the time was not even a dream. It was not possible. The idea that for a company like us, self-funded, we found a publisher back then, like it wasn't even like a considerable path. It wasn't even in your mind that you could actually self-publish. Like the console platform would not have spoken to us, right? We were lucky to find a publisher that worked with us, but it was very, very, very hard. Now, today it's possible. We're seeing a lot of successes happening on a yearly basis. So if you're saying, can we see companies going from one person, two, three people, suddenly becoming very successful? It is possible. The thing we need to bear in mind that it's not going to happen for everyone. It's
Yeah.
not going to happen for everyone at the same level of revenues and success. People need to be careful about in the media, on Twitter, whatever, social media, whatever. We tend to talk about success more than failure. So I always said throughout my career, especially the last 12 years, look, it is possible. But also you need to understand that it's not easy, it's difficult, and way more people fail to achieve their break even
Yeah.
than people then break even. And even fewer make a half a million profit, even fewer make a 2 million profit, and very, very few make tens of millions, right? So, but it is possible. And the recommendation we always used to give when we were giving talks at Xbox and PlayStation, like, think about the challenges. Don't risk take a calculated risk. If you really believe in it, there is an opportunity to go out and do it, to create a beautiful experience. But be aware that you could fail and make sure that the risk you're taking, you calculate the risk, you know you're going to be fine even if something goes wrong.
There was something really amazing through this 50 streaming sessions we had with the 50 finalists for IndieX, which was noticing uh, the increase of projects, of amazing projects, that when you actually meet the people behind it, most of the times are like one person, two people developing some amazing things, both technological, artistically, culturally relevant. And I think this is this idea of someone like you had in other medium in the past, like a person single-handedly creating his own album or its own short movie. But now you're seeing this in video games. It's really amazing. Don't you? I know you contact with lots of people, and now you're also on the publishing side of. Well, you already were in publishing side. Now you're in a company doing lots of indie publishing. Don't you feel sometimes personally amazed of what sometime really young people are pulling with by themselves or with a really short team?
The moment we talked about at length about it, but the moment you had this opportunity for people, creative animals as we are, to give them tools that are easy enough to use to widen the number of people that can actually use them efficiently, and then they have the most diverse ideas. So you're bringing in fresh talent that when I started would not have been able to write games, just because not everybody can write assembly code, right? Not everyone can write C++ code, right? Or C code, or suddenly you're having a bigger top of the funnel of people can create an incredible experience. I think Flash was the first time, God bless Flash technology, long gone now, but
Yeah.
the ability, we were seeing artists that used to use Flash to create animations,
Yeah, yeah,
suddenly able to create games, people that would never been able to code a game, suddenly coming up with incredible ideas just because they could,
yeah.
right? And you mentioned at the media, right? Somebody with a guitar suddenly writing an incredible song just because it is enough to play a guitar, not that easy if you listen to me playing. I'm terrible. But and that's it. You open up the funnel and then you bring in new people with new backgrounds, with new point of view. And you get more diverse idea, new topic being touched on because the commercials, larger companies in the past, through the 2000s and 2010s, the problem like too many sequels, too many uh, game space or movie franchises or toys or well there is a commercial aspect to it. If you're a company, you need to make money, but then you have a lot of people coming out of the west say, well, I have a bit of time, I have this dream, I'm gonna do it, I want to tackle this subject, I want to create this new gameplay. And then sometimes there's the element of like, who cares what happens financially? And then suddenly you see so many diverse games coming to the market. And that's why I'm saying there's never been a better time. Because new topics, new gameplay experiences, new ideas, new approaches being taken. And I'm going to go up slightly longer with this answer, but in the 12 years I spent a platform, one of the things that really like lost, I wouldn't say shocked me, like maybe shocked me at the beginning, but like how happy independent developers, especially the smallest one, or where to embrace new business model, new distribution methods. I always talk about early access. Early access model has you have seen on Steam, the game preview model on Xbox, and there's only been created as a thing because independent developer, one man in a room, one woman in a room, like, they accepted this model. Like,
Yeah.
what have I got to lose, right? Let's release my game and see how it goes, right? It's not finished. Buy it from my website, right? And suddenly independent developers started embracing this. And
Wasn't
then we
sorry?
started,
Wasn't that in a way Mojang's?
yeah, I mean, not that's, when we look at not, that's what they did.
Yeah.
When you look at title like Daisy, I work
Yeah. Yeah.
very closely with Dean Hall. And, I work very closely with Dean at PlayStation and Xbox, and Bohemia. Like Daisy was a mod, right? Which
Yeah.
is again, it's a community-driven initiative, and suddenly launches in early access, which at the time was new on Steam, and suddenly gains momentum. And then there are more titles going in early access, and even early access has evolved over the years. Today, it's not what it used to be at launch. But again, only an developer would dare to say, what, my product is not finished. Let's check it out. And now and see what the market says about it. And then you started seeing bigger studios doing it, like, Sea of Thieves, my friend Craig and the team at Rare, they were developing the title through the insider program, and the Xbox fans were able to access the title that was in development. They were not selling it. There was more like developing the title and having regular feedback from the community. But then you start to see the bigger companies doing that, considering that model. Again, it started from independent developers. When we saw free to play coming to the West, at the beginning, it was mostly maybe not the small developers, but it was, independent developers that were starting to embrace in conversation with us, like, yeah, we want to do it. I work with CCP Games. I'm sure Ilmar won't mind me mentioning that. We worked on the launch of DAS 514 on PlayStation. That was first-person shooter, was exclusive to PlayStation 3 and PC, I think, at the time. And that was a breakthrough moment in terms of as a project because, one, it was free-to-play title on the console. We had some, I think it was Sony Entertainment titles that were free-to-play on PlayStation, but really DAS 514 was the title that was coming from a third-party publisher. CCP wasn't small, but it wasn't thousands of people, embracing free-to-play. And then that title not just embraced free-to-play, it launched in beta. It was the first time a title was selling a beta on a console, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. Somebody will tweet me and say I was wrong, I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we changed the policies at that point. And then you have that. And then it was cross-play. I mean, that 514 was a first-person shooter connected to EVE Online, and players in EVE Online on the spaceships were able to click a button and bombard like an area on the
Whoa,
planet on a first-person shooter game on a console.
whoa.
Uh, yeah, how many years ago, right? Okay, CCP wasn't three people in a room, right?
Yeah,
CCP was, I can't remember the size at the time, was hundreds of people, 100, 200, whatever it was, right? But still was an independent developer that was like, you know what, nobody has ever done this before.
that's
Let's see
right.
what happens.
Yeah,
So, and when you look the impact, and then I'm gonna stop, otherwise I'm gonna go on and on and on. When you look at the impact, I like to talk about Arma 2, Arma 3, sorry. Well, actually, the Arma franchise, right?
yeah,
Arma is a very moddable title from Bohemia Interactive. Very vibrant modding community. Suddenly, you have Dean Hall and a bunch of people creating a mod for Arma that becomes DayZ. And DayZ goes in early access, it becomes a great success. And then suddenly you have a mod of a mod, which becomes effectively PUBG, right? It
yeah,
starts from there, right? Playing around with that, and then suddenly becomes player unknown. And this player unknown really changed our industry in the first person shooter. It really had incredible impact. And then suddenly you see, Activision and EA and the bigger companies going and embracing the battle royale. And if you're a historian of games, you can actually look all the way back from uh, Call of Duty or Apex and those kind of games, or Fortnite, and you can trace them all the way back to a mod of
yeah,
Arma that kind of triggered the sequence of events that brought the industry to that point.
yeah. The same thing with MOBAs, which are pretty successful, like League of Legends and Dota.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And again, it's
yeah,
digital distribution, the ability to mod something, distribute it to a million of people, that passionate audience. And tell you what, at the time when at PlayStation we were opening up to the independent developers through PSP Minis and then PS Vita, PS4, PS3 self-publishing. For me, two books that really helped formulating my views are probably big dated now, but they were called The Long Tail, Why the Future of Business is Selling Less of More. And then the second one was Free. Both books actually are written by a writer called Chris Anderson. If I'm not wrong, Chris Anderson was the original editor for Wired magazine.
okay,
So I always quote those two books when I talk about the evolution of my thinking when I was a platform, especially the long tail. Really, it's when I read it at the time. Now it's obvious, right? Not, now it's an absolutely obvious thing. But in 2009, the concept of the long tail, the fact that if you have a huge amount of addressable audience, uh, the niche, suddenly the actually niches are very, very big.
yeah,
Uh, that was kind of, God, independent developers might be super niche, but when you niche you can reach is amongst an audience of tens of millions or hundreds of millions, that niche is enough to create a viable business.
yeah. Ago, let me ask you one last question. You mentioned Luis Antonio, which is a great friend of ours. He's actually this year's president of IndieX jury. So tonight we're going to tell everyone who are the winners. But I have to tell you something about, ask you something using Luis Antonio as an example. You are seeing increasingly developers that are creating their own studios, their own projects, but there are people that worked for many years in the AAA business. For example, Luis came from both Ubisoft and Rockstar. And you're seeing this with veterans with 20 years in Blizzard, Activision, Electronic Arts, living, I would say, comfortable careers. And I don't want to dive into this, but something that, for
Yeah,
example, when I was starting 18 years ago, my dream was to achieve that kind of, to go to a big company. Now you see like an exodus, like many veterans getting into the risky part, which is developing their own companies and their own projects. Why do you think this is happening?
think because one is viable. We all have to pay bills, right?
Yeah,
So, and big companies. I've done a few big companies. They are not always the best environment if you want. They're not always safe as jobs. But generally, there is this thing is that it's a big company. They can pay me. They might not fail. So there is this element, right? Today, there are plenty of opportunities out there that make it viable for people with experience or not without experience to actually go out of those bigger companies. I think the attraction, the pull, the gravitational pull of the bigger companies is more balanced today than it used to be years ago. And I take my own, personal journey, right? And I talk about this when I joined Thunderful, and I think I did the MCV interview. I love my job at Xbox. I love my time at Xbox. It's a great team. They've done so much for the independent development community. I had a great role. I think I was liked enough in the company. So what I was saying, I wasn't running away from Microsoft. I just loved it. But actually, I
yeah,
wanted to do something with my career that was a personal growth, a new challenge. And again, I need to pay the bills. So, but the fact that Thunderful is a small company, Thunderful, we are 420 people
yeah.
as a group. In my team, we're about 320. My team, it's not Microsoft with, I don't know, 140,000, 150,000 employees, right? So we are a small company, but it was solid enough and enabled for me to say, before I retire, I want to try something else to challenge myself, to
Yeah.
realize a dream. And I think that's why a lot of people are doing it. They just want to do something different. And now it's easier to make the decision than it was years ago. Whether, like me, you join the C level of a company that ultimately is still listed on the stock market, or you join an independent studio that just got 5 million funding from someone else, or it's more viable now, I think, than it was in the past. That's why a lot of people are doing it.
It's amazing. You gave me a really similar answer to someone you know for sure, Shahid Ahmad. I asked him like three. We had a phone call, and I asked him that out of curiosity, and he answered something really similar to your answer. So I believe that's yeah that feasibility of other possibilities in the video games market. I think it's opening that opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And yeah, Shahid and I worked together on PSP Minis and the
Yeah.
PlayStation for years. So yeah.
Ago, it was really awesome having this conversation with you. You have lots of experience in the industry, awesome points of view. I think you helped a lot. It was a huge contribution to what IndieX has been doing for the last few years, which is celebrating creativity and independent creativity. It was really awesome for you to share your perspective and your experience with us. I really we thank you a lot for being with us during this hour, Ago.
For having me. Thanks everyone for listening to me for about 50 minutes now. And yeah, good luck everyone with the awards tonight.
And we can only also wish you the best. This your position is recent, so we'd like also to wish you the best, both for you and the Thunderful Group, which obviously we are really close to for the last few years. And we think, yeah, success is in front of you also. Congratulations
Thank
and
you.
thank you, Ago. Okay.
Bye everyone.
Bye everyone. We're going to return in 10 minutes with another talk. So thank you and see you in a few minutes. Okay. Thank you all.